Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're diving into Indonesian horror.
Okay.
And specifically, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on the legendary Suzanna. You provided us with this YouTube video exploring her life and death. And I have to say, it's a fascinating watch. It really captures the mystique surrounding her, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
YouTube, with its kind of casual format, gives us like a really unique glimpse into how she's remembered by fans and, just kind of out there in the cultural zeitgeist.
It definitely does, yeah. And I think what's so intriguing about Suzanna is that even though she passed away in 2008, her presence, particularly as Indonesia's queen of horror, is as strong as ever. She boasts like a decades-long career with roles that honestly still send chills down my spine.
Yeah.
And the video really does lean into kind of this idea that her life was often perceived as almost an extension of her on-screen persona.
Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that because the video highlights her iconic film at Beranak Dalam Kubur, or Born from the Grave in English, which, I mean, talk about a fitting title, right? Considering the eerie parallels we see
Absolutely.
between her on-screen and off-screen narrative.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And it's interesting to note this film even got a remake in 2018, proving that, her legacy and the intrigue, the fascination with it is just as strong as ever.
Right.
It's like the line between Suzanna and the character she portrayed was almost non-existent.
It really is, yeah.
And to add yet another layer, the circumstances surrounding her death in 2008 only seemed to kind of deepen the mystery,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It definitely wasn't your sort of like typical Hollywood ending. Officially, the cause of death was diabetes.
Right.
But the video really dives into this kind of shroud of secrecy surrounding her passing. Her husband at the time, Cliff Sangra, orchestrated this very private burial and even went so far as to exclude her own family.
Wow.
So that level of secrecy is, to say the least, curious.
Yeah, you really have to wonder what the motivation was behind, such a tightly controlled farewell.
Right, exactly. And especially considering the video even mentions, existing family tensions. You have to wonder, what was he hoping to avoid? Was it simply a matter of, fulfilling her wishes, or was there something more at play?
Yeah, it almost feels like something straight out of one of her films, right? Like the plot just thickens as more kind of details emerge.
Absolutely. And the video does not shy away from unpacking these details, these kejanggalan, as they're referred to in Indonesian.
Okay.
And we see these odd, unsettling details emerge.
Yeah.
And so let's start with the most glaring one, I think, the no family farewell. Not a single family member present at the time of death, or even informed until after she was buried.
Wow.
Which, I mean, talk about unusual, right?
That is incredibly unusual, even if, Suzanna had expressed some desire for a quiet send-off. I mean, that's very strange.
Yeah, it really makes you question, what was Cliff hoping to avoid by doing that? And this sense of deliberate obscurity, I think, extends beyond just even the funeral arrangements. The video mentions that their home was kept completely dark and locked up after her death. And they even held a memorial service, but at a completely separate location.
Yeah, the imagery is it's incredibly potent, because in so many cultures, a home in mourning has like a very specific atmosphere, the sense of kind of solemn remembrance, right? But here, by kind of shrouding the house in darkness and silence, it's almost as if there was a conscious effort to suppress something.
A deliberate attempt to kind of keep a lid on things, maybe?
Right, exactly.
And this notion of suppression becomes even more intriguing, I think, when you consider that no traditional mourning rituals were held at the house at all.
Yeah, that's very significant, because those rituals often serve as a way for the living to, process grief and kind of find closure. So their absence here, again, just suggests such an intentional kind of deviation from the norm. It's like someone wanted to prevent her spirit from finding its way back.
Right, almost like she was being contained in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's Cliff's account of her final moments. He describes her peacefully passing away after having a glass of milk, which, I don't know, it's such a kind of ordinary, everyday detail, but juxtaposed against, the clandestine nature of her burial. And
yeah.
The eerie silence that enveloped their home afterwards, it just feels incredibly jarring.
It does. It feels like a detail, like ripped straight from a horror movie, almost too perfect, too orchestrated.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And it just amplifies that sense that that something is amiss.
Totally. And it's almost as if By controlling the narrative surrounding her death so tightly, they inadvertently created this kind of vacuum that allowed speculation and rumor to just kind of run rampant.
No, absolutely. And this is where the conversation takes kind of an even more intriguing turn, I think.
Yeah.
Because the video doesn't shy away from exploring, the supernatural claims that have become almost synonymous with Suzanna's legacy.
Right.
And to fully appreciate this aspect of, this Suzanna story, it's crucial to understand the context of Indonesian culture, right?
Oh, right, of course.
Because belief in the supernatural, it's not just like some, niche interest in Indonesia. It's deeply woven into the kind of the fabric of everyday life.
Yeah.
So when you have this figure like Suzanna, whose on-screen persona so perfectly embodies the uncanny, it's only natural that those beliefs would kind of bleed into the interpretations of her real life.
Yeah.
Especially surrounding, the circumstances of her passing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like her career in horror almost gave permission for those supernatural whispers to flourish in a way.
Exactly, yeah.
And the video highlights several of what it calls, quote unquote, Suzanna's horrifying habits that, when viewed through this cultural lens, further blur the line between kind of fact and fiction. For instance, the video delves into her practice of Puasa which is this Javanese tradition of fasting that's often associated with spiritual development.
Yes.
But it's also sometimes linked to more, shall we say, unorthodox practices.
Right, exactly. And it speaks to this duality that seems to surround Suzanna, right? Was she a devout spiritual seeker, utilizing these practices for, self-betterment? Or was there a darker side, like a desire to connect with, or perhaps even control? Forces beyond the veil.
Right.
It's fascinating how these practices that are so steeped in kind of tradition and belief can then be interpreted in such vastly different ways.
Absolutely. And I think the video does a really good job of presenting these details without, passing any judgment and kind of lets the viewer come to their own conclusions.
Right.
And then there's her penchant for solitude. The video mentions her dedicating hours to meditation, sometimes even up to 20 hours at a time. It paints this picture of her as being deeply connected to another realm, even when she wasn't on set,
It's, that level of isolation is, it's certainly intriguing. It really feeds into this idea of her being more than just an actress, right? She becomes this enigma, someone who straddles the line between kind of the earthly and the spiritual.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And the video also touches upon her unusual habit of consuming jasmine flowers, which, on the surface, some might just see that as oh, it's a beauty ritual.
Right.
But within the context of, Indonesian folklore, jasmine is often associated with spirits and the unseen world.
It's as if, even in her personal life, she was surrounded by these elements that hinted at a connection to the supernatural. Whether intentional or not, these details they further solidify this image of her as someone who kind of existed on the fringes of the ordinary.
Exactly, yeah. And then, of course, there are the snakes.
Yes.
The video mentions that she was quite comfortable around snakes, which, I mean, considering, their portrayal in numerous cultures, only adds another layer to her already captivating persona, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, snakes with their inherent kind of mystique and often, ominous connotations become almost symbolic of Suzanna herself. Beautiful, mesmerizing, and potentially dangerous.
Right, exactly.
And from there, the video kind of dives headfirst into the alleged supernatural occurrences that followed her death. And Cliff claims to have seen her ghost in their home, even waving goodbye to him.
It's a very vivid image.
It is.
And I think those firsthand accounts, especially from someone who, shared her life so intimately, they hold a certain power, regardless of whether you believe them or not.
Absolutely.
It's they give us this glimpse into what's possible, or at least what our minds are capable of believing.
Right, exactly. And these kind of visual accounts, they're a recurring theme throughout the video.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just Cliff. His new wife, Nana, also claims to have encountered Suzanna's presence, even reporting a particularly unsettling experience. She was cleaning Suzanna's room, and she reportedly saw disembodied feet beneath the vanity table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's those specific visceral experiences that really, really lodge themselves in your mind,
Totally.
And it's they blur the line between what we consider real and what we might dismiss as, like, our imaginations running wild.
Right.
And the video goes on to describe other kind of like unexplained occurrences within the house. Nana recounts seeing a glowing red orb moving around the property.
Yeah.
And they even consult with a mediator who identifies it as this magical Mer de Lima, or red ruby.
Right. And that's where I think that cultural context becomes even more important. Because in Indonesia, these spiritual intermediaries they're often sought out to help make sense of the unknown. They offer explanations and interpretations that resonate within that. The framework of those existing beliefs,
Yeah. Right. So it's like, it's not just about like seeing something strange. It's about like fitting it into this larger understanding of how the spiritual world interacts with our own.
Exactly.
Right. And these reported encounters with the supernatural, they extend kind of beyond just Susanna's like immediate presence.
Right.
The video mentions a psychic medium claiming to sense the presence of Nyi Roro Kidul's followers within the house. Now, for those unfamiliar with Indonesian folklore, Nyi Roro Kidul is this prominent figure, often depicted as like the queen of the South Sea. And she's this kind of like powerful and often vengeful spirit.
Right. So to connect Suzanna, even indirectly, with such a like prominent entity within Javanese mythology, it's fascinating. It just reinforces this idea that her persona, both in life and in death, transcended the boundaries of the ordinary. She becomes almost mythical herself.
Right, like it takes those whispers of something different about her and just kind of like amplifies them,
Totally. Yeah, it's like this association with Nyi Roro Kidul takes those whispers and then like cements them in.
Yeah.
Almost like a concrete foundation of like, this is real, this is happening.
Right, exactly.
This is who she was.
And it's not just contained to kind of like visual encounters either. The video also recounts unexplained knocking on the walls of Susanna's former room. And this is a phenomenon that reportedly continued even after Cliff remarried.
Oh, wow. That's like the classic horror movie trope, right? That persistent, unexplained sound serving as this constant reminder that something is amiss. Just keeping those who live within the home in a perpetual state of unease.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not even just contained to the house, right? There were even reports of strange occurrences on the set of the 2018 Bernek Dalam Kubur remake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, crew members claimed to hear crying and witness snakes appearing seemingly out of nowhere.
It's almost as if like the act of recreating this like iconic film, of stepping back into that world that Suzanna inhabited so completely, somehow reopened like a door to the other side. It's like her presence, or at least they kind of the essence of
the most well-known characters continues to like linger. Right. Yeah. And I think what I find really interesting is that amidst all of these kind of like eerie details and unsettling accounts, the video doesn't just focus on like the supernatural elements.
Right.
It also acknowledges her undeniable talent, right? And her dedication to her craft, reminding us that she was more than just a horror icon. She was a skilled actress who captivated audiences with her performances for decades.
Right. And I think that's such a crucial point to remember, because it's easy to get like swept up in the mystery and the intrigue surrounding, her life and her death. But at her core, Suzanna was an artist. She poured her heart and soul into her work. And I think that dedication is evident in, every role that she embodies on screen.
Absolutely. And, she wasn't just playing a part. She became those characters. And she kind of like blurred those lines between fiction and reality. And so while the video kind of leaves that question of her, like her true nature open-ended, I think it gives us a really fascinating glimpse into like the power of belief and how these stories and rumors and legends that surround her, they speak to our kind of like our innate desire to make sense of the unknown, right? To find patterns and explanations, even in the face of the inexplicable.
Absolutely.
And so, whether Suzanna actively cultivated this persona or simply embraced the narratives that surrounded her, I think her legacy is a testament to that enduring power of storytelling, particularly when those stories tap into our deepest fears and fascinations. So I guess the question we're left with is like, what can we take away from this deep dive into the life and afterlife of Suzanna, the queen of horror?
Right.
Perhaps it's a reminder that sometimes the most captivating mysteries are those without easy answers, and we're left to kind of grapple with the unknown and to piece together these fragments of information that we have and ultimately decide for ourselves what to believe.
Right, just like a truly great horror film.
Mm.
It's the lingering questions, the shadows that remain after the credits roll that truly stay with us.